So I have given up on figuring out like the exposure thing. I tried it less. I tried to do a little bit more. I tried to change other settings, and I haven't really figured it out. So I will be uh, kind of like probably this until I have like a new idea of what I'm supposed to do. I kind of thought that maybe I could kind of like film for the front camera, like maybe that's going to be better. But who knows? I have to still like up in the air the idea. But what I want to talk about today is just, like yesterday when I was going to bed, when I was already, in bed, I kind of like into a realization that, because here's the thing, there is this book, it's uh, Confessions of a Shopaholic. I don't know, there's a movie too. And I have read that book, and there is something that happens in the book. It doesn't really happen, like in the movie, but she's basically put on the spot. And she kind of, ends up being able to kind of like say a lot of things, regarding her area, regarding, economics. And it's very wish fulfilling, I think. I kind of realized that I want to experience that, in some way. I want to one day kind of get to a point where I'm like, oh my God, I know more than I do. Because I feel like sometimes I'm a little insecure, a little unsure about my knowledge of things. And, as a consequence, whenever I'm trying to do something, there's this feeling of like, is this, what I'm supposed to be doing? Is this the right approach? Stuff like that. And I don't know why, but I remember this when I was in bed, and I was like, you know what, I wish I had this, moment where, I can kind of like prove to myself that I know what I'm doing, regarding, like the many things I have studied in life. But yeah, so I don't know, it's just a little thought. And I'm sharing it here because maybe this is going to help make this happen. But yeah, but something else I was kind of like observing for my life, because as I said, the day before yesterday, I ended up having like a lot of like little realizations when I was in bed trying to go to sleep. And yesterday I had like another one, which is the whole like the power of not caring, the power of saying like who cares, about something, because that's basically kind of like the reality. I don't know, it's easier when you're kind of like stable for you to do that, but I am in a point where at a point where it kind of seems to be happening, where I look at things that have previously really hurt me, or they had an effect, usually like negative effect, and I'm like, you know what, who cares, like I do not. And that is an amazing feeling, for you to have things that are kind of like dragging you down, like suddenly they're no longer there, like you don't care. So like that was one thing that I was kind of like observing, that I, yeah, it was pretty good, to realize that I'm not really caring about, things that are outside of my control, because I think a lot of it is that, because what makes something very hurtful, it is the fact that like there's nothing you can do. So, with me being where I am at right now, I'm like, you know what, it's okay that I don't have, control over these situations, but, I'm still going to continue to live my life, and, what have you. So that was, really interesting, because I started going through like all the different things that have hurt me in the past, and I was like, like I don't care about that. I'm just focused on myself and what, doing the things that I need to do, doing the things that I love to do, and life is good because of that. Also, yesterday I ended up having falling down, like, I tripped and fell down when I was, I had a lot of, like grocery bags. So my parents think that is probably like, it didn't help. And that is pretty much where I think I broke. That was this bag with like 20 eggs, not a bag, but like a little, container thing. And I think when I fell, like I landed first, and I think the eggs broke. Thankfully, like they were really on sale, so it's not, we didn't lose, like that much money. It was 7.20 for 20 eggs. We usually is this closer to like 15 or 10, so it was a pretty good deal. We didn't even need eggs, but because the price was so good, I was kind of like, yeah, let's do this. But yeah, but I wanted to say I showed my scraped knee, and I'm also it is also kind of like, you can see here, like it is really red. I cut myself here too, so like the damage was more than I initially thought. And not only that, but I kind of like, I think I twisted my ankle, and it is hurting. It is being hurting to kind of like walk. But I don't think it's anything that major. So I feel in a few days it's probably going to be better. I'm applying like this cream here that hopefully is doing something. It does relieve the pain. So like that is like pretty much what I need for this, to heal. Also, I kind of hit my head, like it was, over here, and I think I have a bump now. But at the time, like that was, it didn't hurt or anything, so I kind of like thought it was, nothing. But then I was like, okay, I was kind of affected. I was tired. I was. Yeah, like I was tired, and I was kind of like not, like the clearest. Like my parents have asked me if I had, drunk something or whatever, and I didn't. It was just, having. I don't think I have a concussion or anything, but like I did get a little. At the time I didn't see this, but I didn't feel this. But like right now when I look back, I'm like, oh yeah, definitely had an effect. But yeah, so that is kind of like my adventure from yesterday. Now I'm kind of like challenge myself the next time I'll go out, in my supermarket tour. I will not be buying things, or at least I'll buy only at the last supermarket that I go to, because usually I didn't buy as much as like the like last week, so like that's good. But I went on Wednesday. Wednesday is the day that I, like the fruits and vegetables, they're kind of like really, they're cheaper in a lot of like different supermarkets, which is pretty much why I end up getting some stuff I got less than the time before, so like improvement. But also I shouldn't have picked anything, because things, they kind of like pile up. Yeah, so I have to do better in terms of that. But yeah, but back to like my mental health. I've been kind of like going through like the different personality traits that I want to have, and I kind of like was thinking about something from the past. Basically, I remember, from like middle school specifically, I think that's when it started. I wanted to be more mature than I was. I wanted to have more experiences that I had, and naturally, like when you're 13, like anything kind of like passes as kind of like an experience. But I think that looking around, I kind of, I think I try, I don't know, I kind of like, I know exactly why, I kind of like wanted to, be seen as, as I said, more mature with like a 30-year mind or something. It is because of like that trauma, which, it's not surprising, like that is a response, because, I felt like if I had a little bit more malice in that situation, I wouldn't have, gotten, like, and basically this is kind of like this is where my mind is at, where my mind was at then. So whenever I was perceived as being kind of like innocent or naive, like that really hurt me, because as I said, like it kind of like I associated that with my mind, with like me having that situation happen again. So it was kind of it was quite something. But in the end, like I was able to get to a point today that I don't care. But it took many years, and I think that my lack of experience, which a lot of times happened because, for example, I was going through this very intense depressive episode, so I wasn't really living, I wasn't really experiencing things. And yeah, it was kind of a, I don't know, it is a double-edged sword, because one way, if I kind of like was able to kind of like gain more experience, I would kind of like in theory feel better, but it's not like a solution, so it probably will be a very momentary thing. So I would end up exposing myself to something that was potentially uncomfortable, so I could have kind of like that result, that outcome. And as I said, like I basically, when I look back, I'm like, I can still say like thank God that didn't happen, but it was something, but it was something, yeah, it was kind of like that. I probably should be happy that I was able to kind of like avoid those situations, because they might be leaving me with some sort of like negative feelings towards myself and towards the world. Although to be fair, as I said, like I still kind of wish that I had those experiences. I'm fine with where I am today. I'm fine with like the things that I don't know, the things that like I don't, yeah, I have like kind of like yeah, things that have like they don't have any bearing in my life, but at the same time I still am kind of like craving some of these things. And I kind of like end up getting in certain situations, specifically to kind of like further the narrative in my head, and that is not good. I think that I should be seeking experiences so I can enjoy myself, so I can educate myself, so I can learn about the world and other people. I think that is pretty much like where I should be going mentally. But then as I said, I find myself at this at this place where I am kind of I don't have it's not like a wholesome living, it's just like specific areas of my life. And I don't really I don't know, I don't think that at this point in time, like I'm going to kind of like kind of get to that point. I don't think that, I think that like my kind of like wasteful days, they're kind of over. I say wasteful, but like not everything was a waste of time. As I said, like I enjoy myself, so there's that. But I wish I had done more things to enjoy myself more in a certain way, because like for example, I can enjoy myself by like writing, which is a very constructive thing, something really good for my head, and for my well-being and all of that. But there are other like less healthy things that I can do that still lead to me enjoying myself. So like right now, I guess like in this, I mean, you could argue that like, oh, I could have it both ways. I could have both of them, but I don't know if because I think that there's like a lot of like consequences, to that happening, and some of them like I think that like the aftermath of some things, like I kind of wish there were some things that were kind of like one and done. I would have tried that, I've done that, and then I don't have any repercussions from this. And sometimes repercussions, they are not particularly like anything. It's just, for example, having to tell somebody that like they misread the situation and that I'm like not interested, and because like I could say this in a careless way, but I'm, as I said like yesterday, like I'm more concerned with people's feelings and their in like the way that their brain kind of like works. I don't want to kind of like cause people unnecessary pain, unless the situation warrants it. But that's the thing, I've been kind of like removing myself from the situation in which that would happen. So it's just like me, myself, and I kind of like like it's kind of like my thoughts on the situation, they change kind of daily, because some days I'm like, what, I'm glad that none of those things happened. I'm glad that I was protected, that I was able to safeguard things, I was able to protect myself from like negative repercussions. But then some other days I'm like, I wish I had done more. I wish there was like I wish my numbers were higher, like the numbers of like me doing something or trying something. And I do know that by not having done more of those things, like I'm technically healthier, and because things can always go wrong, and so there's that to keep in mind. So as I said, like it's good that I kind of like protected myself, but it is not what isn't good is the feeling that I have that some days that I could have done more, because I don't know how, because I feel like I still have these feelings, specifically because I haven't really been able to kind of like remove some of my insecurities, from my life, and as a consequence, I have, like this moment. But like I think that the important thing to keep in mind is that I am better off this way. Like even if, as I said, my numbers are not as high, like that's a good thing. I expose myself less, to people, to things, to kind of like possibilities. For example, I had never had any addiction, and that is pretty great. And if I had tried something, what if I had kind of like gotten hooked on something? So like it's good that I kind of like I kept my distance, that I didn't really infringe upon anything. It was just that. But yeah, anyways, that is kind of like these are some of the thoughts that I have. And sometimes when I think like, oh, I wish I had done more, it's more like it translates into the fantasies that I have, the fantasies that rewrite the past, the fantasies that rewrite the present, and fantasies that rewrite the future. I mean, technically it's not rewriting, because the future is not set yet, but it's kind of like I present myself in those fantasies as somebody who has had more of those situations. And as I said, like this is not a new thing. I don't think even that this started after the trauma. I think that before that I was already feeling a little left out at times, because I grew up in like a religious context. So like there was no drinking, there was no smoking, there was no I guess like careless sex, there was no no drugs, there was nothing like that. And so I was kind of like very sheltered in that way. And I think I mentioned this before, it wasn't until I got into high school that I started to have more opportunities to do and try things, but like I kind of didn't. And as I said, like I think that maybe also like I think I might have relied on that to I don't know how to put it, but like because like things didn't always work out the way that I wanted. So like if I had that, I could put point at this is the reason. Kind of like create this excuse, which is not great. Like it's better for you to just take up what happened and own up to it. But like there's that. So I would see some of my friends, because I studied like on a Christian school. I went to church every Sunday, and on Saturday like I was very involved. I was part of the cell group, so I was very like involved in that environment. So there was no kind of like offerings of like those things. For example, I realized that because like it was kind of like a common thing. It might still be a common thing, but when I was a teenager, 15-year-old parties for girls, like they were huge. It's kind of like a sweet 16, but like instead of it is a sweet 15, and it is very interesting that, for example, one of the things I remember is that I didn't go to that many parties. I mean, it didn't help that like I changed like the schools right at the time where people were starting to kind of like at these parties, because I turned 15. It was the end of 2012, and I didn't really have a party. I didn't really want it, but for a lot of my friends who had parties, they ended up having the next year, because I was born in '97, they were born in '98, and so yeah, so like, but even then, like there could have been like more parties that I could have attended. There's more. I don't know. The point is that like I felt left out in a certain way, because usually like those parties is where things were happening. People were drinking, they were making out, hooking up, and all that, and I didn't have like that many options, because I wasn't really in an environment that kind of like offered those opportunities. And as I said, like right now, what was better, things happened the way they did. It's better for me that I didn't really get hooked up on anything. It was good that I was able to safeguard myself, and I don't really yeah, like but as I said, like I think at the time I felt like I wasn't not living up to my potential, but I guess I wanted to be kind of like a bad girl, and that was definitely not me. That was not it didn't have. I was kind of like like Christian straight student that was kind of like very involved in the church, and was very involved in the church at age 15. So yeah, that was kind of like, but I think that I'm kind of embarrassed, partially because of that, because a part of my brain is like, you want to lie about what I did or didn't do, because it wasn't really, because I didn't feel, I guess, cool, or, enough in a way, not really, I feel like enough is the wrong word, but, like there was this feeling that I had that I wasn't, doing what I should be doing, that I wasn't, because I feel like to this day, this is kind of like the situation that I find myself in some areas, because I'm not out there, interacting with people. So, usually like you get to know new things through people that you meet, and that is, as I said, I'm like opening myself more, but it is still kind of like an issue. The fact that, because I mean, I'm starting, new course, like a new college, so like I'll have opportunities to kind of like interact more. But yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know where I'm getting with this. But I know I'm glad that, it's this word salad of things that I said. It's interesting because, like, I'm admitting these things, and I felt mortified, very embarrassed to admit this when I was, like some 3 years ago. So, it's good that I'm at this point where I can, like, be honest with myself, and maybe by being honest like this, I'll be able to figure out, like, the issues that lay underneath, and I'll be able to change myself in a way that I no longer have these cravings, in a way that, I don't know, I want to be cool with me being kind of, like, uncool. It's totally fine. Like, I don't have to be, like, I feel like this is like an unresolved issue from my childhood, because like nothing else in my life is leading to the whole, like I'm very much being this whole like I don't care vibe lately, not even in a rude and abrasive way, but more in like, oh, this is not appealing to me, like all these things, they're losing the potency. So basically what I want is to kind of like get to the bottom of this, of like, why is that I want to be cool? I know this is a very common, thing that people want to be when you're a teenager, and I kind of, but like it has to be like something deeper, because I'm like at the stage of my life where like everything is changed, everything is like much better, but I still have some of these urges. So yeah, I guess that's kind of like my introspective homework for the week, figuring it out. It's interesting because sometimes like you figure things out by just reliving like those situations. So all I have to do, for example, tonight when I go to bed, is just think about like all these different times where that kind of like happened. So yeah. Anyways, bye.